Diddy. You know, he's a good friend of mine. He's a good guy.
He expects.
Is he a good guy?
I don't want to answer that question.
Oh, wow. I think he's a good guy. I'm going to stick up.
Once in 2012 that Diddy was a good friend of yours back then. He has since found himself in some very serious legal trouble.
Yeah, that's true.
Would you ever consider pardoning him?
I haven't seen him. I haven't spoken to him in years. He used to really like me a lot. I could do other things, and I'm sure he'd like me, and I'm sure other people would like me, but it wouldn't be as good for our country. As we said, our country's doing really well.
While the world watched the feds close in on Sean Diddy Combs through raids, lawsuits, and courtroom bombshells, he sat calm, almost smug. Why? Because word on the street is Diddy isn't just fighting the system, he's negotiating with it. And now insiders say he's gunning for the ultimate get-out-of-jail-free card, a presidential pardon. But not through innocence, through influence. Backdoor deals, political favors, and maybe even a few elite sacrifices along the way. For a man at the center of one of the most explosive federal investigations in music industry history, Sean Diddy Combs has been oddly composed. While his homes were being raided coast to coast by Homeland Security, SWAT teams flooding his Beverly Hills mansion, snatching his devices, detaining his sons, even searching private jets and yachts, Diddy wasn't ducking from cameras, breaking down in court, or hiding out in some remote villa. No, he was strolling around Miami in designer tracksuits, puffing cigars, and smirking for paparazzi as if he were just another mogul enjoying the weather. And that eerie calm didn't go unnoticed. Because for every new lawsuit dropped, every accusation of sex trafficking, kidnapping, drugging, extortion, charges that would send any normal person spiraling, Diddy kept showing up unbothered, unfazed, almost smug. He posted cryptic Instagram clips. He played spiritual gospel music. He quoted Bible verses. But behind the polished smiles and poetic captions, something didn't add up. This wasn't the kind of confidence that comes from innocence. It was the confidence of someone who knew something the rest of US didn't. Someone who might already have a way out. And as the public watched him float through club appearances and industry events like nothing was happening, a question started bubbling beneath the surface. What exactly does Diddy know? Why isn't he panicking? This wasn't just ego. It wasn't delusion. It was strategy. Because the deeper you look into the timeline, the more you realize his calm may not be a reaction to the storm. It might be proof that he's already weathered it. That while the rest of us were still catching up on the headlines, Diddy was 10 moves ahead, moving quietly, cutting deals, and preparing for an escape route most men in his position could never dream of. Not legal immunity, not a plea bargain, something far more powerful, something only the rich, famous, and well-connected could pull off. They say the devil's greatest trick is convincing the world he doesn't exist. But in Diddy's case, his greatest trick may be convincing the world he's untouchable. And that trick might be working, because if the whispers are true, Sean Combs isn't running from the law. He's rewriting it. And it all starts with a word no one expected to hear in this case: pardon. As investigators build what looks like an airtight federal case around Diddy, one that spans years of alleged trafficking, drug distribution, intimidation, and financial fraud, a chilling new rumor has started to circulate, one that changes the entire tone of this investigation. Because according to a court insider tied to the Southern District of New York, this case may not end in a conviction. Not because the evidence isn't strong, but because Sean Combs is allegedly playing a much more dangerous game. He's orchestrating a presidential pardon. Let that sink in. Not a plea deal, not a mistrial, not even a hung jury. A pardon, the nuclear option, the kind of political get-out-of-jail-free card that isn't supposed to be handed out to entertainers, no matter how powerful they are. But if the allegations are true, Diddy isn't just preparing for court. He's preparing for history. Because this wouldn't just make the charges go away, it would wipe the slate clean. It would make every federal indictment, every investigation, every victim's testimony legally irrelevant, as if it never happened. And here's the most unsettling part. This isn't a theory dreamed up by bloggers or fan forums. The source leaking this information claims to have first-hand knowledge of sealed communications between Diddy's legal team and political intermediaries, individuals allegedly acting as back-channel operatives between Diddy and high-level government players. Names have been scrubbed, but the implications are massive. Because the idea that a man accused of serial abuse and trafficking could sidestep the entire judicial system, that he could literally call in favors to make the Department of Justice back off, that's not just corruption. That's elite immunity in action. You see, this isn't just about Diddy trying to save his own skin. It's about maintaining an empire, protecting powerful people, and above all, keeping secrets buried. Because if Diddy falls, if this case actually makes it to trial, then everything comes out. The parties, the tapes, the blackmail, the names, the clients, the collaborators. It's not just a house of cards. It's a network of power, privilege, and manipulation that goes straight to the top. And too many people have too much to lose. So if you're wondering why Diddy's so calm, why he hasn't been arrested yet, why the energy around his case feels different from what we've seen with our Kelly or Harvey Weinstein, it might be because he's not just fighting for freedom. He's negotiating for it. And what's allegedly being negotiated isn't justice. It's silence. This isn't just about beating the charges. This is about making them disappear before they can explode, before the dominoes fall, before bigger names get dragged into the light. Because once you start pulling the thread on Diddy, the whole industry unravels. Something strange is happening inside the courtroom. And it's not just the high-profile nature of the case or the celebrity names caught in the crossfire. It's what isn't being said, what's suddenly missing. Because in the middle of what was supposed to be one of the most explosive celebrity trials of our generation, federal trafficking, abuse, blackmail, racketeering, the prosecution suddenly and very quietly dropped key charges. Charges that weren't just important, they were foundational. They told the story of who Diddy really was behind closed doors. And their disappearance has left victims, insiders, and even federal agents scratching their heads. Let's start with the most disturbing, arson. That's right, arson. The case tied directly to Kid Cudi. You might remember, Cudi once said in an interview that Diddy didn't just threaten to blow up his car, he actually did. And shortly after, Cudi's car did explode in his driveway. That bombshell accusation was initially included in the wider federal case as part of a pattern of threats, violence, and intimidation used to silence rivals and control associates. But now, that charge is gone, not challenged, not dismissed in court, just quietly pulled back, like it never existed. Then there's the kidnapping charges, the ones tied to Cassie and another alleged victim known only by her alias, Capricorn. According to court documents, both women were allegedly held against their will at various points, drugged, surveilled, isolated, and in Cassie's case, trafficked across state lines while being emotionally and physically controlled. These weren't just tabloid rumors. They were laid out in disturbing detail in affidavits and sworn statements. And now, vanished, with barely a line of explanation. Why? Here's where things get murky. The federal prosecutors, when pressed for answers, didn't outright say they dropped the charges. Instead, they used language that should raise every red flag imaginable. They claimed they were simplifying the case. They said they were streamlining the prosecution to focus on the strongest charges. But if these allegations were true, if Diddy was involved in bombing a car and kidnapping women, how are those not strong enough? Why would those be the charges you decide to sweep under the rug? And if that wasn't suspicious enough, look at how the media reacted. There was no public outcry, no endless coverage. Instead, we got sterilized headlines. Prosecution refines scope. Government narrows focus. You'd think this was a business dispute, not a case involving sex trafficking and literal arson. And just like that, the conversation shifted. No more firebomb cars. No more hotel kidnappings. No more questions about what Cassie endured for over a decade. Just a vague narrative about legal efficiency. But the timing? Impeccable. These changes came just days after the rumors of a potential pardon began to swirl. Just days after whispers emerged about political intermediaries making backdoor calls. Just days after social media started to connect the dots between Diddy, powerful friends in high places, and a justice system that seems increasingly selective. So what's really happening here? Because to the outside world, it looks like Diddy's legal team isn't fighting a case. They're editing it, redacting the most dangerous allegations, diluting the charges, sanitizing the narrative. And the DOJ? They're letting it happen. Or worse, they're complicit in it. And when prosecutors start pulling punches when the press plays dumb and when the public stops asking questions, it's not just a red flag, it's a warning. Because if they can make arson and kidnapping disappear, what else are they hiding? Something doesn't add up. And it's not just the dropped charges, it's the way the prosecution is explaining it away. When the federal government pulls arson, kidnapping, and trafficking allegations off the table mid-trial, you'd expect chaos in the courtroom. Shock. Legal outrage. Instead, prosecutors delivered their explanation with eerie calm. They lacked proof. They were simply cleaning things up. Cleaning things up? That exact quote from one of the lead federal prosecutors should have set off sirens. It's an effort to clean things up before the jury gets overwhelmed. Clean up what? Evidence? Witnesses? A case they spent years preparing? The phrase didn't sound like legal clarity. It sounded like damage control. Especially when that cleanup conveniently started right after those whispers about Diddy orchestrating a backroom deal for a presidential pardon. Let's be real. When federal prosecutors build a case this big, this high profile with decades of testimonies, surveillance footage, financial trails, and insider accounts, they don't just lack proof. They make deals, or they get pressure, or both. It started to look less like a failed prosecution and more like a controlled demolition, a strategic unraveling of a case that was never supposed to make it to the finish line, like they're intentionally dimming the spotlight. So now the public is being handed a watered-down narrative, one where trafficking becomes inappropriate conduct, where arson becomes property damage, and where kidnapping is reframed as isolation. But underneath all this legal smoke and mirrors, you have to ask, what's really being scrubbed? And for who? Now here's where things take a sharp turn, into the political deep end. Because if you thought this was just a Hollywood scandal or a music industry implosion, think again. The man at the center of this pardon conspiracy has deep, decades-long ties to the one person who could make it all disappear with a stroke of a pen, Donald J. Trump. Let's go back, before the suits, the scandals, or the federal raids. Back to the 1990s, when Bad Boy was rising and Trump was still trying to buy credibility from the black elite. Who was partying in Trump Tower? Diddy. Who was showing up at Trump's fashion shows, casinos, beauty pageants, nightclubs? Diddy. Their paths didn't just cross, they overlapped intentionally. Diddy and Trump shared a mutual respect built on ego, money, and image. Trump was obsessed with proximity to black celebrity. Diddy was rising, and Trump gave him the rooms and the press. In fact, in old footage from the early 2000s, Diddy can be seen praising Trump's vision, while Trump refers to Diddy as one of the most impressive young men in America. And now, that old friendship might be his last lifeline. Because when Trump was recently asked point-blank whether he'd consider pardoning Diddy, he didn't dismiss the idea. He didn't condemn the crimes. He didn't even flinch. He smirked and said, "I think a lot of people deserve a second chance." A second chance? For a man accused of sex trafficking, violence, and conspiracy? Suddenly, it's clear this isn't just about law and order. It's about leverage, about favors, about power players protecting their own when the spotlight gets too hot. If you're wondering why the public isn't in uproar, why more headlines aren't screaming about this suspicious cleanup job, it might be because this was the plan all along. We're seeing it in real time. A soft launch strategy for presidential pardons. Diddy's name isn't being thrown into the fire first. They're testing the waters, checking the temperature. Let's look at who's already been pardoned or had sentences commuted in the last few weeks alone. NBA young boy, gun charges, federal time pending, out early under suspicious review. Todd and Julie Crisley, white-collar fraud, sentence reductions, early release deals. January 6th rioters, pardons incoming. Some already walked. Trump calling them heroes. This isn't a coincidence, it's a calibration. Trump is massaging public opinion by giving controversial figures their freedom first. He's desensitizing us to the outrage, one soft scandal at a time. Because if we accept those, we're less likely to scream when the big one drops. The strategy is clear. By the time Diddy's name hits the pardon list, the public will have already been worn down, confused, distracted, conditioned. The real story won't be about justice. It'll be about optics. Trump can frame it as giving another black man a second chance. Diddy can frame it as redemption. And the media? They'll call it controversial, not criminal. But behind the scenes, it's a carefully choreographed rollout. And the truth is being buried under layers of strategy. So what exactly did Diddy trade in exchange for a clean slate? According to a trusted court insider with ties to the Southern District, the answer is chilling. Names. Not just associates or employees. Not even fellow artists. But major cultural power players. People the public sees as untouchable. And at the top of that list, Tyler Perry. The same Tyler Perry whose studios are praised as a beacon for Black Hollywood. The same mogul who built an empire off the image of faith, resilience, and family-friendly hustle. But behind the scenes, it's a different story. Allegedly, Diddy fed federal agents a dossier, full of witness accounts, financial records, and private settlements, that painted Perry as more than just a friend, more than just an enabler, as a co-conspirator in a protected circle of exploitation. And then, almost like clockwork, a lawsuit appeared. Derek Dixon, a relatively unknown actor, filed a damning sexual assault suit against Perry, claiming not only abuse, but systemic silencing, manipulation, and retaliation. The timing? Suspicious. The language? Echoed phrases pulled directly from sealed court filings in Diddy's case. And insiders say the lawsuit was strategically greenlit, not as justice, but as a signal, a warning shot, a quiet promise kept. Diddy delivered the first name. But here's the kicker. Legal experts are calling this just the beginning. Because the price for a federal pardon isn't small. It's everything. If you thought Diddy was going down alone, think again. Allegedly, the informant deal includes multiple dossiers, carefully compiled files, each centered around a high-profile celebrity, public figure, or media mogul. And the names being floated? Read like a red carpet guest list for elite scandal. Oprah Winfrey, once the queen of daytime, now allegedly entangled in a spiderweb of NDAs and backroom business ties, some said to involve talent coercion and offshore holdings. Gayle King, accused in leaked intel of being a media fixer, tasked with quietly shaping narratives around accused celebrities, sometimes before charges even surface. Ellen DeGeneres, already marred by toxic workplace accusations, but now allegedly linked to supply chains for underpaid, unprotected creative labor hidden through shell companies. And the most explosive name? A former vice president rumored to have been present at private donor events hosted by Diddy's inner circle. A name too powerful to print, but one that could shift the entire political landscape if confirmed. Suddenly, this isn't just about music or fame or justice. It's about a network, an elite protection ring where silence is currency and fame is a shield. And if Diddy cracked under pressure, then the walls aren't just closing in on him. They're crashing down on everyone. The courtroom might be quiet. The prosecutors might be tight-lipped. But outside, the streets are loud. Across TikTok, YouTube, Twitter, people are connecting dots the mainstream media refuses to acknowledge. The narrative isn't conspiracy anymore. It's consensus. Why is Diddy so calm? Why is the media barely covering the dropped charges? Why does everyone around him look more nervous than he does? One viral tweet reads, "Diddy's not worried because he already made the deal. He's the trigger man now." Another post broke down all the mysterious coincidences, Derek Dixon's lawsuit, sudden delays in other celebrity trials, and PR agencies frantically scrubbing old stories from the web. And the conversation isn't just casual. It's pointed, cynical, angry. People feel betrayed, not just by Diddy, but by the system that's using him as both a pawn and a sword. Because if the public believes justice is for sale, and that Diddy's silence is simply being bought by snitching on others, then trust in celebrity, media, and even government collapses overnight. Here's the part no one wants to say out loud. If this pardon goes through, the dominoes won't stop with Diddy. They'll start falling. Everywhere. We're not just talking about more lawsuits. We're talking about raids, confiscations, asset freezes, careers destroyed overnight. The elite, once protected by their PR machines and public goodwill, are now staring at the fallout of one man's survival instinct. Because if Diddy really made that deal, if he truly handed over the keys to the kingdom just to avoid prison, then the people who protected him, enabled him, or turn a blind eye, they're next. The storm isn't over. It hasn't even begun. Because the real game was never about Diddy. It's about who he's taking down with him.